Hi everyone, Tally and Farrell here from Bored of It, and welcome to our review of Cellulose, the plant biology game. Cellulose is for 1 to 5 players and tasks you with making a very healthy plant cell, which is perhaps easier than having an entire healthy plant, which I know many of us struggle to do, including me.
So in gameplay terms, it's around a family weight, maybe a little bit more heavy, but definitely in the lighter region game. It has worker placement and resource conversion. It's also based pretty heavily on the real world science of plant biology. So you'll see you collecting carbon dioxide, collecting water, turning that into carbohydrates, and you'll get some points if you use those carbohydrates to build the cell wall. So we were very kindly sent this by the publishers, Genius Games, to review. And let's get into that review.
So, as we said, Cellulose is a worker placement game at its core. You'll begin with an income or sunrise phase, where you'll receive resources based on your position on this root and shoot board. Then in daytime, you take it in turns to place a single flask on an action space and then resolve that action. Finally, you score up the area control mini game and reset the board for the next round in the evening phase.
Now, most of the action spaces revolve around gaining resources. You've got water, carbon dioxide, protein, plant hormones, carbohydrates, ATP, and cards. Now, the main goal could be considered to gather water and carbon dioxide because you can convert this at one action into carbohydrates. And then there's another action that allows you to add carbohydrates to the cell wall from left to right. And we say main goal because this is the most straightforward way you'll get victory points, because where you place that carbohydrate, you'll get the points printed on the space. However, the cards will in some way always give you VP, whether it be end game or immediate, and a lot of them also have bonuses, which means that there are other routes to victory other than just engaging with the cell wall.
Other actions include moving up or down this root and shoot board, which has multiple options and tracks when it comes to how many resources you can get during the sunrise phase, and there's also an action spot that allows you to take the first player token. Another interesting area is this central vacuole, which players can add water to through various actions. At the end of the round, whoever has added the most water to the central vacuole gets to move up this little track, which gives VP, and that player will also get an additional action token. Finally, the game ends when the cell wall is completed. Let's just say, right off the bat, that Cellulose is a sharp little box, despite being on the lighter, almost family weight side of things. It's got enough bite to keep heavier gamers like us engaged throughout, but it's straightforward enough that you could also play it with children and young teens.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent way to teach worker placement as a kind of genre, because in Cellulose, it's not as mean as you get in other games. In other games, you'll generally have the thing where maybe I go to a space and now you can't take that action until potentially the next round, tough luck. Whereas in Cellulose, what happens is most actions, they have one space for one person that will give you a lot of resources, and then a space for any number of people at that same action, which gives slightly less resources. And this reduces the frustration you can feel in worker placement games, which people like us like, but others might not, particularly if you're playing this as a family or using it as a teaching tool.
Turning to gameplay, we really like how, despite seeming straightforward, i.e. get carbohydrates, put it on the cell wall, get points, you quickly realise there's a lot more going on here. You can also get points and extra actions by contributing water to the central vacuole, which turns into an area control minigame, which can get quite ferocious. And the card play is also pretty on point, as it allows for alternate strategies to develop.
There are cards which provide endgame VP. There are cards which allow you to take an action marker back. There are cards which will provide a variety of different bonuses, and you can keep getting that bonus for a small fee every time you play a subsequent card. And because all cards give you VP in some way, be it instant or end game, it allows this second layer to Cellulose to emerge. where alternate strategies can come into the game. You don't have to just depend on the cell wall.
Speaking of different strategies, the root and shoot board is a delight. Where you are on this board determines your level of income, and part of what you want to be doing throughout the game is moving around on this board to increase your starting resources. But where it gets spicy is that there are different paths to take at either end of the board. Maybe you don't want to truck with it, so you go up a side path and settle for a moderate income, but then that allows you to focus more on cards or the main board. Or maybe you want to get all the way to the top, get more income, and allow you to do photosynthesis without having to use a precious action, but that's at the cost of having to work kind of hard at it.
Well, this is exactly what Cellulose does well. It provides the players with interesting decisions and tough choices to make. It's which track should you go up on the root and shoot board? If you have a carbohydrate, should you put it in the cell wall for points? Or should you spend it to get ATP, which kind of allows you to interact with the auxiliary systems, play cards, and all these kind of things. And when you get to the cards, I mean, what card should you get? When should you play it? Should you take that action to get a card, or should you use it to get resources because somebody hasn't gone here yet and there's still a lot of resources available? Just full of these decisions.
Now, while we obviously really enjoy Cellulose, it doesn't necessarily mean we can outright recommend it for everyone. As we said earlier, we personally prefer medium to heavier weight games, and this probably is just on the lighter side for us. This, in turn, means that whilst we really enjoy playing the games, I think at a certain point we're going to feel like we've kind of seen it all, and that's probably going to come sooner rather than later. Now, it being a little too light for our preferences is of course not a criticism, it's just something to be aware of. And to Cellulose's credit, it comes with 2 extra scenarios on top of the base game, which alter the rules in some way or even use different boards. And whilst these scenarios aren't wildly different, they do change the importance of certain aspects of the game by creating different crunch points and therefore extending the longevity.
Cellulose is probably best for people who like lighter to medium games, or maybe families if you have teenagers or children. Maybe you want to use it as a teaching exercise. So it would also be good if you work in a school or as a kind of, teaching tool in schools. And I think this is because it's a really good lighter game, but it also, in terms of the theme and the mechanisms, it merges them pretty excellently. I think the way that they kind of turn what happens in the cell into board game mechanisms is really fascinating. But what's important to note is that I have a science background, and I think that, whereas Tally and others who don't have that background have said that they didn't really feel like they were learning anything from this game. And I think the point of this game is to learn something. So there's obviously an issue there. And I can actually understand that, because I think without having someone stand up at the beginning of the game and lecture you about the ins and outs of plant biology, or making every player read the kind of science behind the game guide that comes with the game, it's very easy for this game to suddenly become abstract. I'm getting 6 grey cubes and 6 blue cubes, and then I'm turning them into a green wood boy. And I think, as well as an extension of this issue, it can actually make this game harder to teach than maybe the same game with, let's say, easier theme. Because once you start spouting off about cell walls and celluloses and plant biology, people start to go, and likely they'll end up just being like, oh, pass me 6 blue cubes, rather than actually calling it what it is. Final thoughts. If you like science, if you have kids you want to get interested in science, or if you just like light to medium weight board games, then Cellulose is a pretty good prospect. And just like to take the time to say that we really appreciate what publisher Genius Games and all the designers involved in this and their other games we've played do, because it's so obvious the amount of care and passion that goes into every aspect of this, the art, the components, the design, kind of translating scientific principles into a board game. And it just shows, I think, how despicable it is when you get kind of big publishers putting any old tat in a box just because they know it'll sell. Yeah. But here, I mean, they know it's not going to be the next Gloomhaven, but they're still giving it their all. And I just really love the production of every Genius Games game we've played.
Definitely. If you're a regular viewer of our channel and your tastes typically align with the sorts of games that usually end up in our favourites, kind of heavier games, then maybe Cellulose isn't for you. We will say that it's definitely worth to play if you get the opportunity, but we do worry a little bit about the staying power if, like us, you do prefer to have a game of something like On Mars or Pax Pamir over Ticket to Ride. Although, personally, I love a bit of Ticket to Ride. It's just foul. He's being salty.
Well, you say that, but I've won my last 3 games we've played. So.
Yeah, but you didn't win much before that.
That's not true. I wouldn't say much. Anyway, go on then.
So if you enjoyed this video, we'd really appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel if you're not already. And please feel free to ask us anything about the game in the comments. And if you've played Cellulose, let us know what you think about it in the comments as well.
Yeah, and if you're interested in science games, we've already done a review of another game from the same publisher called Genotype, which was an incredibly fun game.
Yep.
You get to roll about 20 dice at once, if that's one of your things.
That's fun.
So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
See ya.